Third generation programming languages. This is looking at now computer languages, coding languages that are used still today. So they may have been developed around the 1950s, and they certainly have easier coding than second and first generation languages. And there's less experience required for the coder in the sense that you don't have to understand a whole bunch of mnemonics that are written fairly vaguely or out and out binary code as you'd need for a first generation language. So if you look at the evolution, this diagram is mostly funny, but actually looks at the first, second and third generation languages, Hex, the assembler, and then the C family and Fortran. They're more and more and more complex, more advanced. And that's the idea with that diagram. They get used in compiling and executing code, and basically every programming language you can name today is at least a third generation language. Big thing here is that they are machine and CPU independent. They do not run directly off a processor, and therefore you can compile the same code for many CPUs. Examples of third generation languages: Fortran, COBOL, Visual Basic, they're all early examples of programming languages, third generation languages. But now C, Java, Ruby, C#, C+, they're all third generation languages, and they all use the same basic structure, which is almost English in the coding style and structure. So you'll see you have your lower level languages, first and second generation, your higher level languages that are almost English, in your third, fourth and above. And we're looking at third generation languages, so Fortran, COBOL, C, C++, C#, Java, JavaScript, Ruby, J, etc. They're all third generation languages. Third generation languages are designed to be close to human language, such a way as they should be easier to code with. They're designed to be easy for coders and programmers to understand because of the syntax. And words from the program should form basically an oral language. For example, in the majority of the program, we name our variables with words from an English vocabulary. By the way, if you're coding in Spanish or German or Italian, you can create syntax that is in Spanish, German or Italian. That's another advantage. They're not specifically English-based, which is good. So if you look at your source code, this is what you type. You have something called a compiler. Compare that to a second generation language that uses an assembler. You have a compiler that compiles your language to generate object code and then gets executed by your computer. And that's a big difference to an assembler, which is assembles and runs. So a third generation language has a compiler and then executes. So one of the ways that 3GLs have made programming easier to understand is through the introduction of named variables and command structures in the order they're being executed. This makes your programming a lot easier to express and a lot easier to do. Here's an example. You'll see that we have basically, looks like C code. And down the bottom, is using my.project.foo. It's using words that you can understand ostensibly as being English. Internal void, these are English words. In such a way as when you go to code, instead of trying to understand a very generic or general mnemonic, you are understanding words that are English, and they should have approximately the same meaning in English as they do in code. So here's the evolution. We start with our machine language of zeros and ones, our assembly using repetitive instructions and shorter code sets, to our procedural languages, which if you like is to our third generation, which if you like is procedural, to fourth and fifth generation languages, which we'll come to soon. Limitations of 3GLs, well, it's not based on natural language. It is still a syntax, so it's a whole grammar set that you need to learn. When you're learning a third generation language, you are learning a new language. You have to learn the structure of that language. If you like, it's grammar. Whereas a fifth generation language is designed to use natural English. A fourth generation language is getting closer. But a third generation language requires its own syntax. And so therefore they are not necessarily as user-friendly as we would like them to be, sadly. Advantage of a 3GL over a 2GL, very much. It uses a mouse and keyboard for input. Because computers are more powerful, they're designed to process more data and faster. Relative file sizes are smaller. As I said, you can have many languages to code in because it's coding in a language close to your native language. Maintenance is lower because it's machine independent. And the accuracy is because your compiler should, in theory, pick up mistakes. Should, in theory, pick up mistakes. Okay, so compilation, interpretation, and translation are three words that have specific meanings and need to be understood. 3GLs need to be compiled from a higher level language to a lower level language. Once it's compiled, it gets interpreted by the program interpreter and to be executed by the CPU. So some examples of 3GLs, there's a whole bunch of them. And in fact, if you look at most of these languages, you'd agree, I think most of these are languages that we use today, well and truly. Thank you for watching.